Greetings. I live in Minnesota where there is snow in the winter. My friend Lou Wilmont wrote a song to welcome the snow. It's to the tune of She'll Be Coming Round the Mountain, and I invite you to join in and sing with me and do the motions. It'll snow in Minnesota, that's for sure. Yeah, sure. It'll snow in Minnesota, that's for sure. Yeah, sure. It'll snow in Minnesota. It'll snow in Minnesota. It'll snow in Minnesota, that's for sure. Yeah, sure. Great big fat wet flakes falling down. Plop, plop. Great big fat wet flakes falling down. Plop, plop. Great big fat wet flakes, great big fat wet flakes, great big fat wet flakes falling down. Plop, plop. Yeah, sure. It'll be 3 feet deep by morning up to here. So deep. It'll be 3 feet deep by morning up to here. So deep. It'll be 3 feet deep by morning. It'll be 3 feet deep by morning. It'll be 3 feet deep by morning up to here. So deep. Plop, plop. Yeah, sure. Even if it's below zero, we won't care. Brr, brr. Even if it's below zero, we won't care. Brr, brr. Even if it's below zero, even if it's below zero, even if it's below zero, we won't care. Brr, brr. So deep. Plop, plop. Yeah, sure. A long time ago, in the winter, in December, before there were cell phones, before there was electricity, there was a farmer who lived alone in the country. And he sensed that a great snowstorm was about to come. And so he knew that his animals in the barn would need food. So he got in his warm clothes and he went out to the barn and he fed the cows and the horses hay. And as he was leaving the barn, he remembered he was almost out of firewood. And so he put his axe over his shoulder and he walked into the woods. Now in the near part of the woods there was not good firewood, so he walked further into the woods. And as he walked, the snow started to fall. It began to fall quite heavily. He walked, and this wind began to blow. It was blowing the snow and he was beginning to feel quite cold. In fact, his feet inside his wool socks and his boots were starting to feel a little bit numb, his toes there. But he kept walking further and further, looking for wood, and finally he had to stop because the wind was blowing the snow. It was swirling so much around him, he couldn't even see his hand in front of his face. Well, he kept walking and walking here and there, and finally he realized he was lost. And his mind began to fill with dark thoughts. I'm so tired, but I have to keep walking. If I stop, I'll probably freeze to death. I don't know which way to go. And I live alone. No one is going to come look for me. No one will come rescue me. So I just have to keep walking. He was walking and walking, and suddenly the wind blew the snow out of the way, and he saw he was standing right in front of a huge tree. He had almost walked right into that tree. Well, that tree trunk looked so inviting. He was so tired. He just slipped down into the snow and laid down his axe there and sat and leaned against the trunk and closed his eyes. He just needed a little rest. He was falling asleep when something, he didn't know what, but something woke him up, and he saw up ahead a light, a little light. And that light gave him hope. And that hope brought him strength and courage. So he got up and he began to walk towards the light. He walked for almost an hour, and as he got closer, he saw it wasn't just one light. It was 9 little lights in a window. And he got to the house and he knocked on the door. His neighbor and his neighbor's young son answered the door and saw him and quickly brought him in front of the fire. They put warm blankets around him and they fed him delicious soup. It was the best meal that he could remember in a long time. And when he had warmed up, he told them about being lost in the storm and how somehow I saw a light, and as I got closer, I saw there were 9 little lights in your window. What was that? Oh, said the farmer, you've seen our menorah. We are celebrating Hanukkah. It is the last day of Hanukkah. A menorah is a candelabra, and it celebrates the rededication for us. It's a miracle that happened long ago in Jerusalem. We have the shamas, the first candle, and each night we light one the first night, two the second, three the third, all the way up until 8. This is our last night. We are celebrating that miracle that happened long ago in Jerusalem. You see, the Greeks had come and they had occupied Israel, and they had taken the temple of the Jewish people and they had desecrated it. They were worshiping, slaughtering pigs on the altar. They had a statue of Zeus there inside the temple, and the Jewish people could not practice their religion. Well, there was a man named Judah who had sons. They were shepherds, and they got the people together to fight against the Greek army. Because they were shepherds, they knew where to hide in the caves of the hills. So they would attack and then run away and hide. And finally, they defeated the Greek army and they won their temple back. They went in, the people were so happy that they cleaned it all up. They took down the altar. They could not find the temple lamp. You see, a Jewish temple has a lamp that burns all day and all night. And the Greeks had taken their lamp. Well, they beat down the weapons, it said, of the Greek soldiers and made a new lamp. But there was no oil. It would take 8 days for the priest to make this sacred oil. Finally, someone found a little bit of oil and they decided they would put that oil in the lamp and light it anyway, even if it only lasts for part of a day. Well, it lasted a whole day and a night, and it continued to burn. It was a miracle. It lasted for 8 days until the priest could make more sacred oil to fill the lamp. And so we celebrate that miracle and also the miracle that just a small group of Jewish people could defeat a whole army. When the man who had almost frozen to death heard the story, his heart was warmed. He stayed that night with his neighbors, and the next morning, before he set off to go home, he told them, I don't know how to thank you for saving my life. Your menorah was a miracle for me. And every December after that, for many years, the man who was not Jewish celebrated Hanukkah. He celebrated by telling this story and lighting candles and hoping that miracles would still come. And so it is now in the time of a pandemic. Sometimes we don't know what to do next, but we must just put one foot in front of the other and take the next loving step. For love is the most powerful force in the universe, and love will show us the way. The light of love is glowing, glowing and growing. The light of love is glowing deep in my heart. Gently will I walk the earth, seeking, speaking peace to birth. Gently will I walk the earth, deep in my heart. In this winter of the pandemic, there is a story that brings me hope. It's an old folk tale. Long ago, there was a fishing village on the shore of a great big lake. If you can imagine, like Lake Superior, big body of water. And in those old days, it was only the men who went fishing. Well, this fishing village had a problem. They did not have enough fish, they thought, to last through the winter. The women went to their menfolk, to their husbands, their fathers, their uncles, their grandfathers, their sons, and they pleaded with the men, "Don't go, please, don't go out for one more catch of fish. It's a season of storms now. If you go, we're afraid that a storm will break and you will all drown. We'll somehow make the food stretch through the winter. We'll get by even if we don't have enough fish." Well, the men heard their womenfolk, but they didn't listen. After all, they thought, we are the providers of this village. It is our job to make sure there is enough food to last through the winter. And so they got their nets together, they kissed their womenfolk goodbye, and they got on their boats and they went out on to the great big lake. The men hadn't been gone very long when the sky turned perfectly black and the wind began to howl and huge waves came crashing onto the shore. Just what the women had feared had come to pass. It was the worst storm that anyone could ever remember, and the women were afraid they would never see their men alive again. The women left their cottages and they went down to the dock and met there, and they all began to pray for the safety of their men. And after they had prayed for some time, someone looked up and said, "Look, look, there's a cottage up on the hill. It's on fire." And they looked and they saw that there were flames leaping through the thatch roof of that cottage. Well, the women all ran up the hill to try and put the fire out, but by the time they got there, it was too late. The cottage had burned to the ground. One of the younger brides in the village, whose name was Annie, was crying. It was her cottage, and she remembered that in her hurry to go and join the women to pray down in the dock, she had forgotten to blow out her candle on the table by the curtains. The wind must have blown the curtains into the flame, and it had spread, and now she had nothing left but the clothes that she was wearing. The women gathered around her and offered her comfort and said that they would help her get through this. And very soon someone called, "Look, look, down at the dock. It looks like the boats are coming back into the bay." And sure enough, the boats were coming home. The women ran down the hill and they waited there on the dock. And as the men stepped off the boats, everyone was hugging and kissing and laughing. Everyone was so happy and relieved. Everyone but Annie. She walked up to her fisherman husband and crying, she said, "How can you ever forgive me? I let our cottage burn down." Her husband looked at her with love, and he said, "Annie, you must not cry. It was the light of our burning cottage that brought us all safely home." The winter solstice on December 21st, 2020 will be a special time, for it is then that the planets of Jupiter and Saturn are in conjunction, and they will appear to look like the Christmas star that is told of in the story of the birth of Jesus. In honor of this special solstice, I have created a story. The candle is burning, longest night of the year. Come all who seek comfort and banish all fear. Stories told from the heart will bring us good cheer. Celebrate winter solstice as the Christmas star appears. Celebrate winter solstice, the longest night of the year. Once upon a time, not so very long ago, on the day that was called the harmonic convergence, when planets in our solar system were aligned, that was back in August 16th, 1987, everyone was quite excited. People, angels, fairies, and animals had all gathered in Carmarthen Forest in Wales. Carmarthen Forest was that forest where long ago the wizard Merlin had lived. They had all come to be present for a special birth. The father of the baby to be born came from the blue star Rigel, 800 light years away from Earth. He was a magnificent unicorn. Rigel is that star that is in the constellation Orion, and it is called the blue star because it appears that way to our eyes. His eyes were that same brilliant star-like blue. The baby unicorn's mother looked much like my puppet. She came from the center of our earth, and she had a shimmery horn and lovely shimmery mane. It was all white. Now, I can almost hear some of you saying, "Oh, there aren't any unicorns. They're extinct. They've all died out." But maybe because they were so hunted and they were an endangered species, maybe they just went into hiding and we don't often see them now. Well, the people were all, and the animals and the angels and the fairies were all holding their breath, waiting for that baby to be born. And when the unicorn came from his mother, they all went, ah, and felt a deep sense of peace. The unicorn was a midnight blue-black mane and body, and he had the sparkling star-like blue eyes of his father and the beautiful gem-like opal horn like his mother. Now, guarding this birth was Merlin's dragon, Aitusa, the great white dragon that had never spoken throughout the ages. Merlin had seen that in the future that the human beings on this planet would need help, and he had given the dragon the job of guarding this special unicorn. When the great white dragon, Aitusa, who had never been heard to speak, saw the baby being born, he chanted one word of peace in Sanskrit 3 times. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. The baby unicorn's mother took him with her back into the center of the earth until he was grown, and when he was an adult, he traveled back to Carmarthen Forest. Aitusa was there to be his teacher, his guardian, his protector, because he had work to do to help our planet. Aitusa taught him how to change how he looked, like a chameleon. He could change his colors and his shape and blend into the environment so that none of the evil giants or monsters, demons that wanted to kill him could even see him. And as he slept, Aitusa would guard him and keep the evil at bay. Now, like all unicorns, the black rose had the power of healing. He could dip his horn into polluted and poisoned water and make it clean and safe to drink again. And if he touched his horn towards an animal or a person, they would be healed. But unlike other unicorns, he had other work to do, for his horn could shoot out beautiful rainbow-colored lights. Look kind of like the northern lights, only with the rainbow colors. And he would shoot those lights out to clean up all the water and the air pollution around our planet. And if you would go to sleep at night feeling very lost, hopeless, and discouraged, he would visit you in your dreams sometimes and bring you back hope. In fact, he would come at night and visit the scientific researchers and slip ideas into their dreams of how to cure cancer, heart attacks, the virus going around. He did his work in a beautiful way. And he wants us to help him. If you see that rainbow spiral lights in the sky at night, you may feel that you want to be a helper. And how you do it is, if you see someone being mean, you put your hand on your heart and you feel the love inside of you. And then you just send the light out through your fingertips, blessing and loving that person. That way, you can be one of Mr. Rogers' kind helpers. You can be what the former President George H.W. Bush called 1,000 points of light. For we need all the light and the hope and the love now that we can make. Christmas is a time of year when families traditionally gather, but in this year of COVID-19, that isn't always possible or wise. A long time ago, there was a rich farmer, and he was wondering who he should have take over his farm when he died. He was getting elderly, and he had 3 children. The eldest was a son, the second was a son, and the youngest was a daughter. Now, traditionally, he thought, in our family for generations, it has always been the eldest son that inherited the farm. But times are changing, and I'm not sure that that is the best idea. I need a test to see which of my children is the wisest and will be the best manager of this farm. Well, the prosperous farmer thought and thought, and then he came up with a plan. He called all 3 of his children to come with him to the barn, and he told them, I have been wondering who of you would be the best one to manage the farm when I die. Which one of you would be the one to inherit it? And so I have a task for you, a test. I'm going to give you each 1 gold coin. And you are to leave the farm and be gone a month. You can use that money and that time to get something that will fill the barn. After a month, you come home and you show me what it is you have brought to fill the barn, and I will decide which of you is the wisest. He said goodbye to his children, and he sent them out into the world. Now, a month can be a long time when you are elderly. And in that month's time, the plague that was ravaging the earth came, and the farmer grew ill. He was so weak, he didn't leave his bed. He was wondering if he might die from this illness, and he longed to see his children. He wanted them there with him if he was going to die, but he realized it was he himself who had sent them away, and they would not be coming home for a month. At the end of the month, he had survived, and using a cane, he went out to the barn and waited for his children to return. Soon he heard the wheels of a wagon coming down the road around the bend, and as he craned his neck, he saw it was his eldest son on the wagon, and he had loaded the wagon very high with big bales of golden straw. That eldest son called, Father, Father, open wide the barn doors. And he drove the wagon into the barn and he began to unload all those bales of hay. When he was done, his father said, "No, you have only filled one corner of this great big barn. Let us wait and see what your brother and sister have." They waited a little, and then they heard another wagon coming down the road, and they saw this time it was the second son. And he called, "Father, Father, open wide the barn doors." They saw his wagon was stacked full of gunny sacks. When he drove his wagon into the barn and he hopped off the seat, he began to take those bags, open them up, and toss the chicken feathers he had gathered into the air. The chicken feathers went way up to the rafters of the barn, but of course they settled down to the floor. And when he was done, his father said, "No, you've only covered the barn floor. It didn't last, filling the barn with chicken feathers, but that was a good attempt." And they waited. And then they heard footsteps. And it was the youngest, the daughter, coming down the road. And she called, "Father, Father, close the barn doors." When they opened the door to let her in, she came into the dark barn, and she was holding a candle. And the light of that one candle filled the entire darkness of the barn. And then she began to sing, "Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright." And then she sang, "Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King." And she sang, "Away in a manger, no crib for a bed, the little Lord Jesus laid down his sweet head." And when she finished singing her carols, her father was smiling, but he had tears in his eyes, and he said, "My daughter, you have filled the barn not once, but twice. First, you filled it with light, which represents knowledge. And then you filled it with music, which represents beauty and love. And beauty and love together make wisdom. So you shall be the one to inherit the farm when I die, because I know that you are wise and loving, and the farm will prosper under your management. And because you are wise and loving, your brothers will never be hungry or homeless." When you were born, you cried, and the world rejoiced. Live your life so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. When you were born, you cried, and the world rejoiced. Live your life so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice.